we've been through 75 years of NASCAR racing, and you two have lived virtually every minute of it, whether you've been a participant or not. We just want to kind of rehash a little bit about what's been going on the last 75 years, but we got to start with what happened this weekend. You know, you guys are both very close to North Wilkesboro Speedway, and just your reflections on, you know, the last 8 or 9 months and being back here racing. Dean?
Well, you know, I got a little cold. Talked to a lot of people this weekend. Not a cold, but just hoarse. But you know, I live about 300 yards from third and fourth turn, and you know, I sat here and watched it dwindle down, and then I sat them watch what they've done, the progress they've made to bring this place back. And you know, it's just been amazing to me. You know, sit here to see the transformation that they've made in, you know, like 9 months. Just about every day that they was here, I'd make a lap around the racetrack just to see the improvements they made and how they done this, and the wet weather we had this weekend. Luckily, we didn't, this winter, we didn't have any snow or anything like that much, but it just seemed like it wanted to rain just about every day. But they came in with the right equipment to get this stuff done, and you know, what the stands, everything they've done is just amazing. It's just amazing what they've done to get this thing back going.
When was the first time you heard that we were coming back to race cup cars, and what'd you think?
Well, you know, I was sad to see it shut down to start with. I think it was 96 or whenever they shut it down. And because this was like our home track. For so many teams that live around here, we actually called this our home track. But Marcus gave me a call, or my people had talked to Marcus, and they asked me if I'd come up for the announcement that they were gonna bring North Wilkesboro back. At that time, there wasn't nothing said about running the All-Star race. I was up here with a governor and rode him around the track, and we did the announcement. I think you were here and Dean was here, and you know, I said, man, this is really gonna be cool. And at the time they were talking about how they were gonna put it back on dirt and race. And I said, man, it'd be great to see us thing, just see Wilkesboro back. But when they announced the All-Star race, I said, wow, man, that is gonna be great. And I'll tell that story a little later.
Yeah, well, you know, and having come for the racetrack revival last year, I wasn't surprised that we were gonna race here again. I was surprised that it was gonna be in 2023, seeing how much been done. But to Dean's point, if anybody can make construction happen at Speedway Motorsports, the way they embrace this and transform the track. And you know, to me, it's almost like we're going back to the future. You know, I've heard that said a lot over the past few months and past few weeks. So when you think about, you know, you guys have been involved in this sport 60 plus years, and NASCAR's been around 75 years. When you think about how racing has changed and evolved, and to me, it's different for different people. How do you see racing has changed and evolved in your career, and how this is this a back to the future to some extent?
I think it is. The cars are so much different. Now we have the this next Gen 7 car, and this is the first real race car that we've ever had for NASCAR. Before, we always ran stock cars with stock chassis that had been modified. This car is totally different with all of the racking pinions and the transaxles and all the stuff like single lug nuts, all the things that all your other series have been running for quite a few years. So I think the biggest change I've seen, and Dean, you can probably talk about the days when you were driving and I was driving, the safety of the sport has escalated so much, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, with your all your support for the drivers in the car that came up with. You know, me and Richard first started racing, Richard probably had a school bus seat like I had.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I had in a race car, and you just had one thing right here, and it's in the seat belts, you know. And but the involvement that they've had and the safety walls that they put up here, and it's just made tremendous difference. You know, I watched basically the race yesterday. You see the car kind of turn right and go in the wall. It didn't really hurt the car. You know, I know the speeds was way down from what usually are at the bigger tracks, but it's just amazing how the cars held up and the way everything held up here through this weekend, through the safety. And And the car, the tires, low profile tires with single lug. I think that's the difference. I think that makes them a little harder, I think, to hook up on these racetracks because you don't have the flex that you do with taller tires. But it's the way to do the corners, the way they stick, and I think y'all run about 58% left side weight in these cars now.
Yep.
Where used to was about 55, and that makes them a lot different. So.
And I think the other big thing, Dean, that I've seen, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is the engineering of these cars. The engineering is so much the big key of this new car that we're running today. It's mostly engineer driven, and you got to have a super engineering group behind you, and you can just miss it just a little bit, and you're out of the race that day. It doesn't take.
When did that evolution start? Because you think of the Kirk Shelmerdines as the crew chiefs, and now you have engineers as crew chiefs, and you've lived through all that. When did the engineering influence start within the sport? Back in what time frame from your recollection?
RCR had the very first engineer that I think was even in NASCAR. It was Bobby Hutchins, and he had came out of NC State down there, and we had hired him to come up and work with us. He is a racer and loved racing, and that's the very first, and it started back in '86. And as all the other teams got involved, Roush had used engineering with their sports cars, and Rick in other areas, and that evolution kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And today, at one time, RCR had like 50-some engineers, counting the engine shop, race shop, chassis shop, and other things that we're doing.
Well, you mentioned Bobby Hutchins. It makes me think of the grassroots racing. He was a modified racer at Bowman Gray, where you got started. Dean, your grassroots racing, when you think about the Dash Series and racing here, it seems like that continues to be the foundation of NASCAR and of motorsports in general. How did you get involved in it, Dean, from that grassroots level, and how have you seen grassroots racing evolve?
Well, when I first started racing, it was my dad owned a salvage yard, and basically we raced out of a salvage yard. There was not, that was in 1972, 3 and 4, and around that time it seemed like everything was just involving, getting more and more technical through the engines, the pulleys that run on the engines, all the the fan system there. And basically, one of the first races was here that I ran. First race actually I ran on asphalt. I won it right here, and won 15 races here. And as we went on, they were just regular cars with a roll cage in it. And so I was basically one of the first ones to develop a tubular frame for the Dash Series, and which that's about the time that came along in the Winston Cup cars, back in the 70s. And so they started building their own chassis and doing all that. So I look like it was in the mid 70s when everything really started evolving and changing and making the sport grow. And like when I was crew chief for Junior the last year that they ran, that was a lot of engineering, and that was a big deal. That's when they really started coming in. I can see like even Ray Abraham when he came in doing the rear sway bars and all that stuff. I was sitting there, me old country boy, I said, man, we don't need that junk. It's gonna hurt us. We need to run these shocks and springs. And the shock world came on. We ran. Used to run 4 fluid shocks, and it came on with the gas shocks, and that really changed the sport, I think, from where we started.
Yeah. Well, innovation has always been a part of it. We hear more about it today, but you think back to the Wood brothers innovating the pit stops and what your guys did, the Flying Aces did in innovating pit stops and what guys did. So that part of it doesn't seem all that new. It's just got a different spotlight on it. Would you share that perception?
Yeah, I think these cars today, you constantly got to be looking for every advantage you can get within the rules. Sometimes you go a little past it, but I think you just got, these cars are so held so tight today that there's a lot of things that you can't do that we used to do to the cars, you still try to get it. Now we're looking for thousandths within the bodies or chassis or wherever we're working, where before you could take and move pieces and parts and stuff. But the engineering side of it today is a whole key to, you know, I sit in there and watch our guys going through all the simulation and all the stuff they're doing, and it just amazes me. It's way over my head, just an old country boy. It's just, when they start talking all these numbers and stuff, it's got so technical. They're still innovating, but they're doing it in a different way today through engineering. We got these simulators now that are drivers, and we even got a guy that sits there and runs the simulation programs all during the week.
We talk a lot in every sport, but especially in NASCAR, about different eras of racing. You mentioned we've had 7 generations of cars. There's eras that are around drivers, and there's eras that are around other aspects. When you describe the different eras that have existed in NASCAR, how do you articulate what those different eras are and to somebody that might be new to the sport?
You know, the cars have definitely changed from back when Dean and I were racing back in the 70s. And I think the way I relate to it is the drivers. You know, I was around when Lee Petty and all these guys back in that day, Joe Lee Johnson, all those guys turned it over to Richard and David Pearson and that group. That group turned it over to the Earnhardts and Jeff Gordons. They turned it over and today you got the new guys of William Bryans and all of these guys. I relate to it by all the changes. That means I'm getting pretty old. I've seen a lot of changes in drivers just like you do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's, you know, like the iRacing, you know, that's involved a lot of races. You know, some just came out doing the iRacing and been great race car drivers and never really done much more. So that's just so many ways to be educated, but still, to me, you know, you've either got it or you hadn't got it. That's the way I look at it.
Are you like RC, that you look at it more from the eras of drivers than the eras of technology and cars?
You know, I've got you know, 2 grandkids that's racing some late models, and you know, they talk about why is this Josh Barry so good, and it's, you know, it's like in my day in the Dash series. You know, basically I was about unbeatable. And it was just a feel of the air that you're in, and when something ever ticks on you, you've got it. And you just got to get that one tick, that good feel. And when you've got that, just like Dale Earnhardt when he drove, and like, you know, Jeff Gordon, you know, when it started, they wasn't that great. But when it finally ticked, it ticked. And so, and I can see that through involving today and what NASCAR's got now in the drivers. You know, that some of them comes out, and all of a sudden it's like they're Dale Earnhardt. But it takes a while for them to involve into that.
Who was your first favorite race car driver?
Well, I guess I'd say old Junior was probably the first one, because, you know, the first race car, actually, according to what my dad told me, that Junior drove was my dad's car. And they went to Hickory Speedway, and they ran 7 races. Junior won 5 out of 7 and finished second the other 2. My dad went to the people that was building the race car and wanted to get his money for what he won. He still owed them $200. He just gave them the race car and quit. It's basically what I was told. Yeah.
How about you, RC?
I'd have to go back to Curtis Turner. I was selling peanuts and popcorn at 8, 9 years old at Bowman Gray Stadium and watching Curtis Turner and Glenwood in the old back seat, number 16, and that was innovative back in those days. He'd sit in the back seat, and that was in the 50s. And but Curtis Turner, I just liked his style of racing, the Myers brothers. But Curtis Turner was always who I really followed and liked. And I'd go over there as a kid, and we'd slip in there in the evenings and hang out with the race drivers. And one of them would say, "Boy, go get me that moonshine over there." And old Carl Burris with his monkey riding in the car with him. I don't know if you remember that, but I got so many stories and thoughts of back in when I was a little kid. I can't remember where I put my sunglasses a while ago, but I can remember what happened in the 50s when it comes to racing.
I know the feeling.
I think I was the same. My mom tells a story. I went to Daytona when I was 6, and my dad was doing PA there. And they said after the race, when we got to meet Richard, who won the race, that I told him I was pulling for Fireball till he fell out, and then I started pulling for him. And when I thought about it, it's not unlike some of today's kids who navigate to the look of the car. And you think about Fireball had the purple car, and Richard had the bright blue car, so it's like a 6-year-old got fixated on the car itself. But it sounds like yours is a local hero in Junior, and yours is Curtis Turner, I guess, who was probably running up front. Was that what attracted you to him?
I think just his lifestyle, hanging out down there, watching him and racing, and just how he raced and drove. He was definitely a hard charger, and he won a lot of races. And but I just think that's how I got attracted to following him, and then throughout my life I've kind of changed around.
Well, this may be a question like, who's your favorite grandchild or great-grandchild, but if you think of the different eras, do you have one that kind of in here in your heart is your favorite era of stock car and NASCAR racing?
You know, I think the 80s, early 90s was probably the heyday in my eyes of watching back, working with Dale Earnhardt, one of the greatest of all times, and just seeing the racing and the characters that were involved. And back then we didn't have the old cell phones, and we didn't have all the things. It was more of having a lot of fun and going out and enjoying yourself and pulling in the racetrack. Our saying was, we brought our friends with us. We didn't come to make friends. And that was the way racing was in the 80s and maybe even up to the early 90s.
I couldn't wait on Friday afternoon after work to get in the car, get on an airplane, and go spend time in the garage area with guys. Life has gotten busier. Not just NASCAR racing, but life has gotten busier. You don't have as much of that time. So, do you have a favorite era from your perspective?
Well, I'm kind of right there where Richard is. I think that was the development of the NASCAR. I remember this track. I was, like I said, been here for 71 years, 300 yards from this place, and I saw a lot of things happen. I saw them have races here, and not many in the stands, but in the mid to late 70s, 80s, and 90s, right through there, is when the stands started filling up. People started coming in, and the field was filling up. And I know my dad was part of this place, on part of his speedway, from 1952 is when he actually bought in. He was here to help Bill, but he bought in 1952. By the way, I guess moonshine business was good that year.
Yeah.
but he bought his party in, and then, to just see it all develop, and I think his first check that he got out of this speedway was probably in the late 70s to early 80s, and it was $1,400. He showed me the check. They just kept putting back in to build this speedway, and it just wasn't enough, And the 80s and 90s definitely was the greatest time.
Well, you mentioned, Junior being, your first favorite driver. You also crew chief with him, worked with him. When I think about favorite stories, it's got to go back in some way with Junior Johnson. What's one of your favorite Junior Johnson stories?
Well, Junior was, like I say, raced with my dad, and the stories about Junior, they talk about, I've seen them put this building down about the Junior's Shine Shack, and that's pretty good. Whether he's put it in the walls or not, I don't know. It's hard to put a quart jar between two 2x4s, but I'm sure there was a lot of shine drinking there. But Junior, to me, he was like, I could go down to Junior's shop. It's just a lot of favorites. I say, Junior, when I was working on the 4-cylinder car, I went down one time, I had a motor. He had a dyno that he wouldn't use. I said, Junior, can I dyno my little 4-cylinder motor over? He just looked at me and laughed. Or 2 days later, he come down, and I was running my motor on that dyno, and he just shook his head. And, I was pretty innovative and stuff, just to be an old country boy and a lot of common sense. And Junior was just, just always a great person to me, and to our family, and to racing, and I always admired that, what he done. And as far as a real favorite, I don't know exactly where to put it. He was just a favorite person to me. Let's just put it that way.
I know, you've got some stories that we could just go on and this is a family show, but there's so many with Dale, so many different stories that I know I've heard, but what are some of your favorite stories with Dale, with Junior, and that era from the 80s you were talking about?
Going back to Junior, everyone has mentors in their life. And I've had several, going back to Bill Jr. And Junior Johnson was probably one of the biggest mentors in racing to me, because when I decided to get out of the race car, we were in Anniston, Alabama, running Talladega, and we went over there and I met with Junior that evening. So I want to talk to you. People, R.J. Reynolds, had talked to me. So I owe so much to all the guys, Ralph C. Graves and all the guys with R.J. Reynolds back in the day. Convinced me it was time. I had an opportunity to put Dale in the car, and I went over and talked to Junior that evening at old Motel 6. I never will forget him telling me, he said, boy, there's a lot of good race drivers out there, but we don't have any real good car owners. I think you'll make a good car owner. And that was the best advice he gave me. And of Dale's stories, man, I got so many. I can't even begin to tell you where the great Dale Earnhardt stories, that everything from fishing to hunting to racing to celebrating at the Waldorf Astoria, our first win. I mean, there's so many out there. Someday I might write a book, settle down, and take the time to do that and tell some of those old stories.
Let me tell you one Barney Hall told me, and I trust Barney Hall, who's a long-time MRN broadcaster, and I would say maybe along with Tom Higgins, the two most trusted journalists that's ever been in this sport.
Yeah.
So, do you remember the time that Barney and Jim Phillips, as they were leaving the Richmond racetrack, walked into the side of a motorhome? Did you ever hear that story?
No, I didn't hear that.
So we're leaving the racetrack in 1990. It's that really cold race. Remember when it was like 5 degrees below? So you walk across Laburnum Avenue, which has two roads going this way and this way, and there's a median in it. So as some of us were ahead of them and had gotten all the way across, they came to the median and stopped, and then they walked out and didn't see that the lane that was supposed to be going back in the other direction was counterflow. So they stepped out and literally walked into the side of the motorhome.
No kidding.
And we looked down and turned around, because we were getting in our cars, parked across the street to go to the airport, and they were laying on the ground. So we run up there, and the ambulances came in and took them to the hospital. They each had a broken rib, and one of them had a collapsed lung, and all this stuff. They were okay, but they were out of commission for a while. But Barney told the story the night of, first night he's in the hospital. He said the nurse came in and said, Mr. Hall, he said, I know you don't feel that good, but there is a gentleman on the phone that wants to talk to you and will not take no for an answer. He said, this went back and forth a little bit. Said, I cannot get him to take no for an answer. Do you mind talking to him? He said, well, I'll try to. So he said, hello. And this voice come on the other end of the phone and said, how in the heck do you call 400 laps of racing and you can't see a dang gum motorhome? And he said, and he's still a little bit foggy. The man said the same thing. Said, how do you call 400 laps of racing all around the world and you can't see a dang motorhome? You can kind of fill in some of the the words.
The other words, yeah.
And he's still a little bit foggy. And then he says, hey, dumbass, this is Earnhardt. How are you? Are you okay? Then the next thing, and you probably got more of these stories, said, do I need to send my plane to get your mom and Karen? Karen was his girlfriend, his mom. Do I need to send my plane to come get your mom and Karen to be with you? Yeah. Now, is that not classic Earnhardt? He's going to give you a hard time.
Oh, yeah.
But he would not have wanted anybody to hear that story.
Yeah. Dale did so many things like that, send his airplane, do different things for people. He did so many things he didn't even want people to know he did. And I look back at many of the things I know that he did that people would be totally surprised coming from the Intimidator, but he had that side of him also.
When you think of special moments in NASCAR, I mean, there's some that come to mind. I want to get y'all's perspective, and then there might be 2 or 3 that you were involved in. But Dean, when you think about what I'd call a tent pole moment, one of the most important, or 2 or 3 of the most important points in NASCAR history, what comes to your mind?
Well, to me, NASCAR's history, is that I wouldn't hear, when they first signed North Wilkesboro Speedway. Just reading the stories, but then what it's involved into. I think North Wilkesboro was one of the first NASCAR sanctioned tracks. Just to hear the stories that they told, that was a big, that I heard my dad and a lot of them talk about the meetings here in North Wilkesboro. Then we're going up to the big, just when they, one of the biggest shows I remember is the All-Star race, that they came up with. Humpy Wheeler and them came up with, and this like they had this weekend. And for me, as far as, NASCAR was just, when I started racing and knew I was a race car, knew it was NASCAR, the greatest series in racing. And then it evolved on up where I even got to run a few Winston Cup races, but, it was kind of low budget and just never got all together. The best finish was 8th at Atlanta, and that was big for me. And most times we finished, we was in 12th, 13th, somewhere around there. And that was with me and 2 like 2 carpenters, it's just basically running the show. I know Jake Elder came up to me at Charlotte one time. I was sitting back and old suitcase looked at. He said, "Dean," I said, "What?" He said, "You can't do it all, boy. You're going to have to get you some help." So, stuff like that. And then looking at NASCAR, I was around it all my life. Seen, I used to water these roads up here when I was 14 years old. I used to stay in one of those little, one of the first suites to built here with a .22 rifle to watch the cars all night long, make sure anybody went to them. I've been at this place, and this is my main deal. And I mean, I'd be up all night long before the races trying to help the race. And the first race car I ever rode in, I was in the pit. I was small, I don't know, probably early 60s. I remember Jack Smith was up here, and they used before what they'd park the cars down at my dad's house in the basement. Richard Petty and Lee would park in the basement, the rest of the cars would park outside. I remember Jack Smith looked at me and said, "Boy, you gonna ride in this race car down the road?" Boy, it tickled me to death. Got in and rode down through the woods, and all the landscape was way different. Boy, I just a smiling when I got down. I got to ride in that race car. And as far as NASCAR, I was kind of a pretty independent person, not as sociable as I should have been back in those days, but I sat and listened a lot and just try to stand back and watch. That's kind of some of the things that I went through, and seeing NASCAR develop, seeing this track develop, and at Daytona, I remember I was, 6, 7, 8 years old, and my dad would go down when it's on the beach, The biggest thing I remember about it was he had a '58 Pontiac, and I was on top of the Pontiac, on the roof of the Pontiac. Here come the Blue Angels by, like it scared me to death. I was rolling off that thing and stuff like that. It's a lot of memories I remember all through NASCARs, and through my dad and mom and what it went through. Bob.
What are some of the moments that you remember, you reflect on, that were the catalyst of NASCAR being what it is?
There were several, and I look back in just the history since I've been involved in NASCAR. I ran my first races at Bowman Gray Stadium in '65 and started racing in '69. I think, Winston, some of the biggest moments that helped escalate the sport where it is today, you think back, I have to look at when R.J. Reynolds got involved in it. That was a big moment for our sport. They brought the backing into the sport to where it really carried the sport to the next level. Then TV, when we hit television in '76, I carried the very first camera for CBS in Charlotte in '74 or '75 before that. And it killed my battery, so the camera was that big. Anyway, that was a deal when we became television, and when Bobby and Cale and these guys got into it. There was a big storm. That so many people were watching the race that day that really turned our sport. And then you go up to the late 70s when the fuel crisis hit, you know, all the fuel stuff. And we made a lot of changes in NASCAR to show the world that we were doing our part. And then you go on up when Reynolds put $1 million up, $1 million to win one race. That was a big deal. And you can just keep going through the history of NASCAR with the changes of the cars and the different TV packages. And I think those are some of the key moments that put our sport where it is today.
Going back to that moment and you know, when we developed the NASCAR Hall of Fame and looked at the different eras, you know, we looked at that transition time frame that you were talking about with Winston coming in, and it brought in other sponsors as well in that as a bellwether moment in that early 70s time frame, and the number of races got cut down. You know, you were more 250-mile races, etc. So that does seem like it's one of those bellwether moments, and then you know you lead from that, and more other sponsors started getting involved in stock car racing.
Yeah, I think when you've seen the branding that Winston did, and it goes back to Junior Johnson, went down and talked to Ralph Seagraves at the Reynolds building in Winston, and that's when they brought Winston into racing. And I think Junior gets a tremendous amount of credit for bringing bringing Winston back into our sport. And what it did, it opened the eyes of so many other Fortune 500 companies. They started getting involved. They said, look, if this company's going to bring their brand Winston in, then you're going to see a lot of other companies coming in.
Well, and the investment that was made at the short tracks and making them look at a higher level, you know. You also mentioned the Bobby and Donnie situation in '79, and it's interesting to hear your perspective, and also '76. You know, I can remember where I was in college watching the '76 Daytona 500, and that snowstorm comes through in '79, and we locked our TV room in our dorm so nobody could go in there and turn on anything else, because we were going to watch the Daytona 500, and watched it, you know, just flag to flag. First one nationally televised. There had been one in '71, and there was a couple of guys that were in the dorm that were big race fans like I was, but then there were another half a dozen or so that came in and they couldn't turn it off, and it made them race fans, and we went to races together after that.
Yeah, I think that was a big moment. I thought it was '76, but I guess it was '79. And to see them, I was in that race. I think I finished 8th or 9th that day. But I come by and these guys were all out there fighting, and all the rescue people were around them. I didn't know if somebody got hurt. There's somebody on the ground. I just kept on going by. But that was a big moment for racing, because like you say, the bad weather and the storms really put people in their house, and more people watched it, and it was a big deal.
What do you remember about leading up to that race? Because you mentioned the weather, and it was questionable. You know, it was raining in Daytona. It was snowing about, you know, the Florida-Georgia line all the way up the East Coast. What do you remember about that at the racetrack?
I don't remember really a whole lot about that, but I remember us trying to leave early and get down there early to be able to run that race. I had an old Ford truck that was cab over that had the car on the back. We didn't even have car covers, and we went through some snow getting there. But we made it down there that year.
Do you have a favorite moment in NASCAR history for you personally?
Yeah, there's a lot.
That's like, okay, you got to pick between Austin and Ty and their grandchildren.
Yeah.
Your great-grandchild. I know that may not be a fair question.
It's almost like picking winning the Daytona 500 with Dale Earnhardt, or winning our very first championship with Dale, or winning the Daytona 500 with Austin Dillon, my grandson. All of those were major moments, and People say, which was your favorite, when Dale won or your grandson? So my answer is blood's thicker than anything. You know?
How about you? Do you have a favorite moment for yourself?
Well, probably running the Dash Series class. I remember being at Childress Speedway. They was having us at Childress Speedway for the first time to run the complete track. So I went to my Richard Mash, was my crew chief, I guess you'd say. I said, we're gonna win this race. We worked, we made us a big carburetor, we done everything to run this race. And Richard said, well, Dean, they're gonna bust you. I said, I don't care, I'm gonna win Charlotte in front of the people, you know. So we go out there, and we had just came up with what's called the diaphragm clutch, that's in the multi-disc clutch, to run in this with the Vega engine. Nobody else had done that. Actually, I went to Junior and talked to him. He said, Dean, if you can get anybody to make those inside splines, you'll have to go all the way to England. There's nobody in the United States can do that. Well, I had a good friend of mine actually wound up going to work for Junior, got him a job, that said was drinking some beer, talking about this race. He looked at me, he said, Dean, I can do that. We got those clutches, drilled the rivets out. He redone the splines, put that thing back in there. It really lightweight us. For some reason at Charlotte, they found out about it. The competitors found out about what we had. And anyhow, I had the big carburetor on the car. And so, man, after the race, they were trying to protest that clutch. They were really just talking junk to the officials. Well, he can't run that clutch. He can't run that clutch. Actually, the rule book said any high-speed clutch assembly permitted. It's basically written. They wouldn't have. So they were over arguing, and Mr. Garland, you remember Mr. Garland? Mm-hmm. He came over and said, Dean, go ahead and get your intake and carburetor off, and he checked his motor, turn your motor down. So I jerked the intake and carburetor off, throwed it in the van real quick. We had another sitting there and got by with it. And I knew I was going to be busted, you know. And that's a $3,000 payoff. That's big for us, you know. But
you had the old Vegas, didn't you?
Vega, this is a Monza, which is the same thing as a Vega at that time.
You had the Vegas early on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what I can remember then driving back in
the orange number 77.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
A lot of innovation.
Oh, a lot
now
of
you see where Junior and this whole group got that. You know, I remember when Herb Nab, when Kell was driving for him, Kell went over there to get the helmet out of the car, and he was all bent over carrying that helmet. It must have weighed 60 pounds. It was completely full of lead sitting there. And we ain't even gonna talk about the lead and the wheels and stuff like that.
I know Junior, you know, but
he was very innovative. I'll put it like
that. Or the 15-pound radio that was in there when it rolled through.
Yeah,
tech.
You know, that and the helmet. I never will forget the helmet with Kell and Herb Nab coming across there. He was all bent over, holding that thing, walking. You could tell it was 50 or 60 pounds.
See, I would go to we'd race the day before, you know, the Cup Series in at Bristol. And the next day I'd stay with Junior and try to help him roll the stuff. Well, I didn't have a uniform. Junior would say, Dean, go out there and get that tarp. You need to bring it back in here. And I'd have to take a wagon. I couldn't do it by myself. You know what I'm saying? I'd take a pit wagon to put it back in there. Just a lot of things like that, you know.
Yeah, those were the days.
Oh, yeah, they were real days.
You didn't know what all you had.
Creative engineering. Yeah. If you step back as a fan and take yourself out of it, when you look at it from a fan perspective, what are some of your favorite moments that you observed that while you may have been in the race or around it, are there things that jump out to either one of you that was just cool to be there and be a part of it?
Well, me, it's just, you know, I guess because I was here around racing ever since I was born, you know, here at the Speedway, that would be, I just don't know where the exact which moment, but the, you know, like I said, the All-Star race, and probably the best moment that I ever went to. I was here watching North Wilkesboro Speedway all the time. Hadn't went to many races, you know, but I would travel, you know, to go put out brochures and stuff like that for the Speedway at different tracks. But I remember going to Bristol and going over, and we hadn't raced, never seen a race. I was around Junior and them over there. And I remember walking down in turn one, and when they dropped that green flag, I said, gosh, I'm mighty when they're gonna back out. I believe Donnie Allison was leading the thing. Here at Wilkesboro, it was a finesse track, you know, had to ease in, ease out and stuff like that. But that was just, I mean, I went and watched. I'd go to the other turn to see how they, see how they hold these cars up, wide open that fast. Not necessarily wide open, but just the way the banking held them in there versus North Wilkesboro Speedway. And basically the speeds were pretty close to the same. And as far as me racing up here one time, that really got me, is me racing, and I wasn't a fan. Well, I was a fan, but racing Enid Staley and said, I'm gonna give everybody a country hound that goes over 100 miles an hour. At that time, the cup cars didn't run about 103, 104 miles an hour. Well, I had the dash car, and I think we was about 96 miles an hour. And I said, asked Enid, if I go over 100, will you give me that cam? He said, yeah. So me and Richard Master, we stayed up here a whole day. We put hubcaps on that thing, side windows. We tried everything to run it fast, and I couldn't. And I walked, and walked down I was on the track. Harry again, walked up to him, and I was talking over Harry. Harry said, "Hey, that car looks good going around there." He said, "This will get you a good first laps, and next time this bonds out of that thing." He said, "You can keep it. I know you can keep it out of the wall. You ain't gonna do nothing but spin out." So he told me. I bonds out of that thing, ran almost 101 miles an hour. I was about 5 miles an hour faster in second place. I just lay on the rail. I said, "Let's go for it."
You got your country ham.
Got my country ham. I got my country ham. I wasn't worried about money. I wanted that country ham.
That's motivation.
Yeah.
So much of your history is whether it's you driving with Dale, with Austin, with Ty. Are there moments you sit back and remember and reflect on that had to do with somebody else that you think about?
You're just talking about a fan. I've always been a NASCAR fan. Ever since I was a kid, sitting there selling them peanuts and popcorn, we'd sit down and watch a race because people wouldn't buy nothing from you. So that's when I really got interested as a fan of the sport of racing. That had to be in the 50s. And, I still like to see good, solid, side-by-side, hard racing today. And that's what the fans want to see. And I think that's what attracts the people is good, hard, side-by-side racing. And so that's why I was a fan. But if I look back at any one, the France family, I knew them when they were at Bowman Gray Stadium. And I knew Enid Staley. I'll tell you one more quick story about Wilkesboro. We was up here qualifying. This was probably 70, 71. I was trying to make the race. Come off turn 2 back there, and it was wet. It had been raining. I got a little wide and got in the water and spun. There used to be some wooden posts on the inside there. I don't know if you remember where they were. I slid down through and I wiped out about 4 of them posts, and Enid come over. He's a big old man anyway. He come over and says, "Boy, you tore my fence down here." I said, "Enid, look at my car. It's tore all to hell." He said, "Look at my fence. You tore it up too."